Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we are here today to talk all things Caliban's War. It's the second book in the Expanse series, so we'll go around the room. Chris, you want to kick us off with an introduction?
Yeah, my name's Chris. I have a YouTube channel that concentrates mainly on books and film, just whatever I'm feeling at the time, and watch the TV series all through. And I'm doing a reread and actually a subsequent rewatch of the TV series. So this fits in quite nicely.
Yes.
Cool. Is it me
Robyn?
next?
Yeah.
Sure. Hi, my name is Robyn. I have a YouTube channel called Bookendsandbiscuits, where I mostly talk about sci-fi with a sprinkling of crime and fantasy. So this fits very much in my wheelhouse as a good sci-fi series.
And I'm Layla Goshi. I'm an English professor, but I'm also a writer, creative writing, book reviews, journalistic type articles. And I love reading sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and just anything fun and innovating. So
Nice.
happy to
So,
be here.
yeah, I'm glad you can all make it. And we're all around the world, so it's really neat that we can, always make these happen. It's always a lot of fun. So it's the second book in the series. Wanted to get kind of an overall feel for it. Chris, what did you think of this one?
Yeah, these books are strange because I think in isolation they're just kind of fun, but every time you read another one, it adds like another kind of like layer on top of it. You kind of went, right, I'm a bit more invested in this. There's a couple more characters, a couple more point of views, and when you watch the TV series and this on the side, you're kind of already in that world and just kind of eating up every single bit that's in there. So yeah, I just think it's great fun, and I think it's a really interesting story as well because it goes so many different places.
Robyn, what were you, this is a reread for you, right?
Yep. Still rereading. Yeah, haven't quite got to the book I left off. For this one, I'm a fan of the series. It's great. I actually didn't like this one as much as the first, but I think that's because I felt like it was very similar. So I did feel like it was almost the same kind of formula of the first book. Obviously, you have got the new characters in there, which I absolutely adore. I think they were a great addition, and I do love them. But it would be nice to see something a little bit new, I think. And I think rereading, actually, I did remember this one more. So that may have been part of it. I'm not sure. But yeah, I thought didn't wow me as much as the first one did. So.
Layla, what did you think of this one?
Yeah, I basically liked it. I agree with both Chris and Robyn. I think it is very fun. I think there is a formula to it that once you start noticing, you come to expect, like for example, in certain moments of stress, there's some humor as well. And I do enjoy the humor of it for what it is, but there are some serious themes too. But overall, I basically liked this second book.
Yeah, it was pretty similar to the first one. I think the first one, in reading the second one, is a very strong first book in a series like
Mhm.
this. But yeah, there is kind of a formula, and the humor towards the end. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but the humor it got to be a little bit too much. It was a little bit. It became like, okay, let's get on with it. Like it's it's kind of the same things over and over again, but not bad. But our friend Fit to Be Read is here. One of my favorites of the Expanse books because it introduced. Oh my! I'm already put on the spot.
Yeah.
Avasarala, I think that's right, and character development in this series.
Hmm.
That's one of my favorite characters in the TV show and in this book. What did everyone think of that character?
Oh, I love Abathurala. I, you know, I really do. I was introduced to her first through the show. So I felt like in this book, when we first meet her, we get a much softer impression of her, or my impression of her, even though, she is cursing. The writers are careful to show that, she's a grandma and she loves her husband and she has this peaceful home life, but she does have this heartbreak of the loss of her older son. So it's a more humanizing way of seeing her than I expected, having seen the show already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it feels like it touches on that much later in the show of bringing back at home to earth for and the family aspect of it. But you're right, at this early stage, it's very much she's not really in power yet. She's very much the assistant to the undersecretary kind of thing, and she's kind of still got as much of a home life as she does this kind of political aspirations for where she's going to go.
Yeah, I think again with the soft side of it, it's a lot of explanation about how she has a mask as well. So a lot of her swearing and how she treats people is just how she manages to get through her job essentially, and how she works with people. But I also think that her relationship with her husband is earthly adorable. I love the idea that you can have a strong female lead who's in such a thing, and her husband is so supportive. And I understand if you've seen the show that there are things, but in this book specifically, I just think it's adorable. Like some of the scenes where she's calling him or deciding whether or not to call him because she knows it's going to affect her. And like when he meets her at the end, I'm just like, oh my God. it's so sweet. But I just think she's such a fabulous character, where she just like goes through the whole thing just doing what she kind of wants to do and like leading it through that way. I just think she's just fantastic.
I love how the husband's such a grounding stick for her, just like you said, Robyn. You know, when she's having these moments of incredible anxiety or don't know what to do next, she's like, right, thinks of him. Whether she contacts him or not, it's kind of one thing, but she thinks of him and say, right, where am I? Who am I as a person? What am I going to do next? And move forward from there. But she's such a fabulous character because she thinks there's a couple like this in the whole series that could go either way on every decision. So they could go totally dark, they could go totally right, they do redemptive, they could do destructive, but it's still consistent with who they've been represented in the series. I think that's one of the really fabulous things about a lot. It happens with a couple of characters in it, but specifically because she's a new character in this novel, I think it's so well done because that happens so quickly in a book. Like she's only in a couple of chapters, and then you already know kind of what it is from the soft, and it probably links to that family link, and then who she is in her job, and you see both sides very quickly, and you go, right, okay, that's who they could be on any given moment.
I do like, how they depict that she does have that political sense, and she knows that they're going to set her up. You know, she knows they're going to try to, silence her, put her off to the side, and so through the story, she overcomes that, and then the meeting with James Holden. It has its strong and weak points. I mean, she does walk in and take over, so that shows her great characterization. I don't know what more I wanted from that scene, though. Maybe it came up too quick again for me. But in terms of how she's characterized, I think they've done a good job with that.
Yeah, it was lovely the way that, not lovely, but kind of the way that she was playing it, where she knew she had to play into the trap almost, because otherwise she would be completely off the field, and how she trying to, I know you can kind of see how it was going to go, but the fact that she had to play into it and then had to explain to people that she still had to play into it so that she could have the potential to get out of the situation rather than just not have that at all and give up there. So, but it was, but yeah, I also liked those kind of discussions as well.
She's savvy though. She banks herself in those situations. She said, like, I know I'm in a bad situation here, but it's not over yet. And I have belief that I'll find some way to get through it. So it's that intelligence that she's the smartest person in the room. And maybe that's why that meeting with Holden doesn't work, because Holden's not the smartest man in the room. He's very much the very consistent person, even though he's the hero of the story in some ways. He's not. He's just a moral center, I think, for each book, because he's going to make the same decision every single time. I think very very much this is what he's going to do. You know what Jim's going to do most of the time, whereas you have these other characters that are very volatile that kind of do anything. That's the way I feel about it, anyway.
Well, yeah, but did you think in this book, obviously, because they had that whole play, just sorry to move on to Holden, they had that whole play where there was like this explanation of his maybe not being the moral center at the beginning. So feedback. So it's kind of like, what did you guys think of that? Because I didn't know if I liked that or not. His kind of like turning into Miller and having that kind of darker side and his trauma almost and the decisions he was making.
Yeah. I think they kind of explain that away through the journey of the book because, it's kind of that release that he ends up getting from Fred Johnson when he finally gets let go. It's that weight that get lifted off his shoulders, to say, oh God, I wasn't who I really was for parts of this past period because of the trauma and because affected by trauma. And then he could kind of come back and say, right, again, where's that grounding for him? What caused him to ground? What's his grounding thing? And it probably starts to develop that it's Naomi is the grounding stick for him. And again, in relationships, and again, this kind of supported by a very strong female character on the side. And the fact she just leaves him alone for that period as well, Robyn, is kind of, she just kind of ignores him, says, you need to figure this kind of stuff out. I don't know who you are.
Sort yourself out.
Yeah, exactly right. We all need somebody like that.
Yeah.
And there is a section where he does say he kind of thinks back that, he was really, he was this guy with a comfortable job, on an ice freighter, and dating women he pretended to, be in love with or whatever. But it was only when true pressure, when he truly met pressure that he became that moral center. But first he had to go through that process of both opposing what Miller represented, but then adopting Miller's tactics. And then, yes, I agree that Naomi was like his centering force. Yeah. So, but I was just going to make a comment that you make a great point of the roles the characters are, well, both of you, Robyn and Chris, the roles the characters play in each other's lives, because Naomi serves a role for James, but then I think Bobby serves a role for us, the reader, too, because as she's watching Avra Sarala go through what she's going through, it's Bobby that's saying, who is this woman? And, she, just other observations. And at first is very skeptical of her, but then becomes very, loyal to her in some ways. And I felt like she was taking me, the reader, through those levels as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Ava Sorella and her, if I got the name right, and her character, because I thought she had the best. I think she was very well rounded because we all have those masks that we wear, whether we're at work or with friends or with whatever it is. We all have those different sides to us. We all have those different modes we put ourselves in. So seeing her family side and then her shrewd and political scheming side, that was great to have both sides of it and not be a one-dimensional character where she's just scheming all the time. That she can't, love somebody the way she loves her husband or love her grandkids or feel the loss of her own son. So I thought that was all really great, and building that character, making it, she to me is the best character so far. Even though Holden is, I guess, the hero or whatever, he is very, I like the character, but he's not all that interesting really. Like as a character.
I was going to say he's born as all hell. Let's be honest, Jim. What's Naomi seeing him, for the love of God?
Yeah, she was asking that herself for a while too. So.
Yeah, and her when Avasrella came in and she kind of took over, I kind of felt like everyone on the ship just kind of assumed she was the best qualified person to take over, and they didn't really question it too much, because when Holden took over, it was kind of like, well, you're the most qualified, so you're it, and they all have that selfish look at the whole situation, like, okay, you give us the best chance, so take the reins. Holden's journey and him turning into someone like Miller, I think Miller gets a really bad rap, by the way, but I think, seeing that turn he takes, I don't think that was given enough attention to make it really impactful. It was, you noticed it, but it didn't have that punch that it could have had if more time was spent on him, maybe having more flashbacks or bad dreams or something to kind of show where his mind was from the first book into what is about the middle of the second book, kind of give it some more weight to make that moment, a bigger deal for us as a reader.
I agree, actually, because although he obviously is, I guess, more aggressive in the first part when he's going through the is it Ganymede? Actually, I didn't almost pick up on some of that until Naomi starts saying, "Oh God, you wouldn't have made those decisions." So I think you're right. It would have been nice to have not more of the trauma, but more of maybe an expression of the trauma, so that it was more identifiable before it was picked up by another character for you. So yeah, I do agree with that. I think I was kind of like, oh yeah, he was being a bit more aggressive. So
That's a great point, because I really went with it. I felt like he did need to become more aggressive, considering the situations he was being placed in. And I found it strange at first that Naomi was, telling him to back off. I mean, he's in the middle of this almost food riot. And I know she doesn't want him to further inflame what's going on, but at the same time, well, yeah, it's important to, be have some protection while you're doing that. So I, I was going with it. So I guess I was looking for more firepower, I guess.
It's interesting for such a heavy character written story. There's
Mhm.
so much happens though in terms of set pieces and in terms of action that
Yeah.
maybe it's just difficult to squeeze in the dream sequence or the period of that, because it's always obviously each chapter is written from one point of view, and it passes off round. So if you're reading from one point of view, then the internal person doesn't always see the trauma. I mean, and often fact, they're the last person to see the trauma, and you only see that through reflection of somebody else, like Naomi or whoever it is that's dealing with them.
Really good point. And Peter is here. Hello, Peter. And I know you have a couple of questions about what we're reading, but we'll come back to that at the end when we're done with. He's asking what we're reading now, but we'll come back to that one at the end. And one of the things that, speaking of Holden, one of the things that I really am not enjoying is that romance between him and Naomi, because they seem so different, and it just doesn't. I don't know. They just don't seem like they would fit, and the back and forth they have just isn't very interesting to me. It's not as interesting as the Abasarella relationship with her husband, because you see the complexity in that, and then Naomi and Holden, it just doesn't seem. It seems kind of forced to me. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of substance there. Am I the only one, or?
It seems like a relationship of convenience. She's literally the only suitable female left in the ship. Even going back to the old, the old Canterbury, he seemed to have dated everybody else that there was in the ship, and in some way, shape, or form. So she's like the only one left, and she is a character, a person of substance. Mm-hmm. But the political leanings and all are all over the place. Like, they are not similar in any kind of way. She's the OPA person that's left the OPA to try and make a life for herself, but she's still very rooted in that, and of course that comes out through the series, in kind of what she thinks should happen, the belt. And he's very much, well, he's this Earth boy, but no real love for Earth, but at the same stage is kind of like a space hopper, more so than anything else. Is happy to exist and live out in space. I don't get that relationship at all. I didn't get it in the TV series. Like, it's not to say that it's badly acted, I just don't think it's there.
I agree. It still seems partly of convenience to me, because they even had that conversation. I mean, Naomi even basically accused him of that at the beginning. But I think from a character perspective of them, whether they get along or not, I started noticing that we are learning about everyone's backstory except Naomi's, and since we watched the show, we ultimately know Naomi's backstory. But I noticed, we hear about Bobby's father and her brother and Avasarala, of course, and James and all of that, but we don't hear about Naomi. So, I think that adds to what we're lacking in their relationship, because he doesn't really understand her yet.
And he doesn't really seem to want to understand her. There's none of that probing bit where you try and find out and try and learn who somebody is by asking them about themselves or anything. It's all very much one direction. That's what it seems to be,
Robyn, what do you think?
I like a romance. But no, again, I think like the other book where we had the first book where the romance that we enjoyed was the was Miller, and then this one it's Avasarala, terrible, and her husband, and yeah, I think you're right. We haven't explored Amy at all yet, and it does. I do agree it is kind of one-sided, but I always enjoy romance, so enjoy it. It's not too bad.
And another great character that was Bobby. I love Bobby. This is a great character.
She's terrific because I like how she's not just a meathead. I mean, she's the head of somebody's brought up in the military background and all the rest of it. But again, she's shown to be smart. She sniffs out the mole. She does all that covertly, without prompting or anything. It's just who she is as a person, and yeah, this great to have this real strong female character in the military role as well. I think that's it doesn't have to be the heavy because it's two heavies. There's one male, one female, I think, in the show, and they're very, very different in terms of background and upbringing and where they're coming from, etc. But Bobby's lovely, though. For somebody that's dangerous, I think you wouldn't mind meeting Bobby.
I like how the authors did show that Bobby and Avasarala they have parallel motivations in that, Avasarala says she's always trying to have her son come back, knowing he never will. So that's what's motivating her. And it is her, Bobby's dead comrades that is motivating Bobby to continue. So it's like they both share similar instincts, but for different reasons.
And that was a really, really cute scene actually between them when they're both having that discussion and trying to work that out and go through why they're doing what they're doing. I did really like that scene. I think Bobby's really good because they play her at the fish out of water really well, because she's like, what am I even doing here, sort of thing. She doesn't know kind of what she's doing or why she's here, but she kind of thinks it's the right thing to do. So I did like the explanation of that and her thought process of whether or not she was a traitor and how she kind of handled that side of a thing, and just ended up being quite confused a lot of the time, which I think is good because you wouldn't know what was happening all the time. So I kind of liked how they kind of left that as well, which was quite interesting. There's a question here then, because I know some people discuss this, which is, did you think that the male gaze aspects of Bobby came across as sexist? Because I know some people not have issue with it, but have raised that as a point. My version of it is I didn't actually think it was, because of, do you know what? Yes, there were discussions about her being a large woman and just being like, wow, like what a beautiful female form. But I didn't think it was to the point that I would consider sexist. But I just wondered what you guys thought about that.
I noticed that. I mean, that, because really it's the number of times they remarked on it that I noticed, but at the same time, I felt that that's also another aspect of characterization of the other characters, that just they do notice. And she is a very powerful, impressive, attractive person. And so that's noticed. But I think it's the number of times they repeated it that probably gets people talking. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking everybody's linking it now to the fact that I said I'd want to meet her. No, but like something like Dresden Files, which I think is real problems with the male gaze thing. Like, it's one of the worst parts of those entire books. I don't think it is a problem here because, one, it reminds you that she's female all the time. She's dangerous and female. It's just like a constant reminder, and that these people will underestimate her, I think, in some ways because of it. But also does kind of show that it's the other people that are doing it to her, and because she's the point of view character. She's not doing it, projecting it outwards, and so we don't judge her. We just judge the other side characters that are doing it on the side, so it doesn't become as problematic then, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did think the way I took it was that Holden, when he was kind of thinking about how this is kind of the type of woman that he was attracted to, I kind of felt that as spoke to his character and his weakness is because he's in this meaningful relationship supposed to be with Naomi, and his mind still wanders instead of him having the control to just be a person and not follow the squirrel that runs in front of him. He's really easily distracted, and that spoke to me about his character, and that he's kind of a goof. Like he's not very reliable. And Amos, the things that he says in their conversations, I took that more of Amos. I like Amos as a character. I liked him in the show and I like him in the books, but he's kind of a scumbag.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the way that's kind of the way I took it. But I think Alex and his I guess kind of semi pursuit, he comes off a little bit more genuine, and he's trying to get to know her and trying to spend time with her, whereas the other ones are kind of just making remarks and making comments.
Yeah. I think they do demonstrate that here's a new, very attractive, powerful person, and everyone's going to react. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And make judgments. And Holden, again, not to belabor the fact that he's boring, etc., but he's not very mature either. He's still a youngish man, put in a prominent position. So, and he is flawed.
Yeah.
Very much so.
I did like the beginning of Bobby's and Alex's friendship because, again, I think if you watch the show, that develops further. But I did like the kind of discussions they had and the first kind of blossoming of that friendship, because it was done very slowly. But again, it felt kind of organic and almost real. It wasn't forced or anything else, and I think that would be nice. I literally can't remember if it does happen as much in the books, but I hope it is something that continues for sure.
But it's still a contrast to Naomi and Holden, isn't it? Like you can develop relationships. Even the one, as you're saying, between Estrella and Bobby itself is developed in like a two-sided conversation about where they find out about each other. And Holden and Naomi never bother.
Right.
They just get into bed. They just get into bed. That just seems to be what happens now and again.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And, you wonder if maybe there was some of that was on purpose, because it does help us understand all of them more, and maybe some of the misunderstandings, some of the ups and downs that they'll encounter, throughout the story. And with Alex, I felt like the Alex and Bobby, it was more about Alex being homesick in some ways, and he's kind of interesting because he puts on this Texas drawl, and it expresses his cultural origins, but yet he's out there flying around in space and like doesn't go home, So it's kind of complex, his situation, and maybe I'm letting the show influence me there a bit too.
But you do also get that, you got that little snippet where Holden was saying he was the worst to Alex because he was almost the softer one, like he was the nicer one in the group. So you got that kind of how the group see him as well, because he's so forgiving. So I think you did get that a little bit in this book about that spoke to Alex's character. And you're right, he's one of the ones that hasn't been discussed as much. He has some tidbits about his history and the fact that he's obviously an older guy and he's kind of comfortable with who he is. But he doesn't have a huge amount of page space yet, does he? So
yeah,
that's right.
We haven't at all talked about Prax. Just putting that out there.
Yes.
Is that
Or
because
me.
kind of like
What were we on Prax? Kind of an important character.
I was annoyed at Prax for being a hothead and going off, half baked, but he is an interesting character.
Yeah, he's not exactly the kind of person you would leave to run in charge of a station at the end, is he really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's given because he goes to all hell when things, he didn't eat for weeks, he didn't do anything like that. He just run about aimless almost until he recognized Holden off the TV, so to speak, and then says, "You need to help me." But yeah, but I did sympathize as a father to turn around and say, like, "Oh my God, like how could you?" Like, it's every parent's worst nightmare anyway, is that your child's missing, and to go alongside the whole world falling apart at the same time, maybe maybe that does have the effect on you that it did.
Yeah, it kind of felt like the what he ends up with at the end. He ends up with all these accolades and these. I thought that was just just to win political points to look good. I'm sure they're gonna. I'm sure they'll find ways to control him. It's just to score political points to say, look at this person that you've all gained sympathy for, and he's fine, and we put him in this position so he can make everything better. Kind of just he's become a pawn in the machine without. Probably doesn't seem like he really or anyone else really noticed that he's just being used. So
Yeah.
but it must be, we think about someone disappearing and just imagine in space. I mean, it could go anywhere. Where would you find someone? Just the vastness that they could be anywhere at all. So
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that he's there because obviously his desperation plays into some of the key decisions that they make throughout it. It's very much, I don't care what you're going to do. I'm doing this. And they're like, right, we'll have to go along and go with him or support him in some way. So, he serves a narrative device in that regard to say, this is the justification for us doing this thing that we're about to do. But to contrast the TV series, obviously May's in the TV series, her role is shown throughout the whole story, and the only time we see May is at the prologue, and then at the end. So there's an awful lot of gap filling in there, if you know what I mean, in dramatization or otherwise. And I found it really hard to separate what I'd seen in the TV series from what was happening during the book at stages, even though she was never really a thing there. Going, God, but this stage, this is what was happening. This is happening to her friends and all of that kind of stuff. I was like, stop it. This didn't happen.
What I was trying to work out, and really I don't remember how it played out in the show, but so we had, so May is the second lost daughter. First was Julie, and then May, and May was found. And so I'm trying to remember, and maybe we don't have to talk about now, but May's ultimate outcome, I mean, she's found and she does not end up like Julie, and I really just can't remember what happens to her after that. So I look forward to reading in the book if something else does happen. But I just think it's interesting they've used that.
Yeah.
Second time they used that plot device.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about the parallels towards that.
I think that's sorry.
I was going to say, because it's a show about people finding themselves in general. Like, I think that's the thing. Like, Amos is lost, Naomi's lost, Jim's lost. Everybody's kind of lost in some way, shape, or form. Of our space, Bobby, which is talked about as well, again, found herself completely lost. And this person was found. I did think it was a bit convenient when May was found that she was okay in some way. Like, everybody else seemed to be horrific things happened to them. And then the one that's left just happened to be her.
They did explain that away a little bit by saying that he'd seen that they were looking, so he'd used it as his kind of get out clause. But actually, one of my maybe negative points about this book is that actually whenever they were in peril, it did seem like it resolved quite easily, or when they had an issue. May turns up okay. The one particular one that stood out for me is when Holden goes onto the ship right at the very end. And then all of a sudden the other guy's there to be able to blow it up. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll just go home. And there was a couple of things throughout the book that kind of did that, and I was like, oh, that's it. Yeah, I do all this build up, and like, oh, okay, fair enough, and move on to the next point, which is again one of the reasons I didn't think I liked it as much as the first one. But yeah, did you guys see that or?
It does suffer a bit from the Star Trek red shirt problem of we have a new group of characters introduced, and oh my god, they're the ones that you're about to die, because that's your role in this story.
Yeah, I thought the same thing with the red shirt thing. Is as soon as this new person, there's this against all odds kind of situation, and then some random person shows up. Oh, I can help you achieve this goal. And it's like, okay, they're not going to make it. So you already know.
Yeah.
Lots of red shirts. Yeah.
Lots and lots of red shirts.
Yeah.
I was just going back to Holden quickly. Do you think, and this has only just occurred to me because of what you said, Lily, do you think we don't get an awful lot out of Holden so that he's kind of a blank page as a protagonist, so that it's thought that we, the reader, project ourselves into Holden in some way because he's going to make the right decision all the time? Do you think that's his purpose? Because he is so underdeveloped, I think, in terms of interest compared to other characters. I suspect that might be why. It'd be interesting to ask Dan Abraham that.
I think so, because he's really just a young person that grew up on Earth, which we can all relate to since we've all grown up on Earth, and so we understand his culture best of all. And he's not a person in power like Sarala. So yeah, I think there is something to that he's that blank slate for us.
He's the everyman indeed, because he comes from a position of nothing and then gains fame, and people all of a sudden put the pressure on him at all corners to say, well what are we going to do now?
Mm-hmm.
But do you remember last time, I think someone in the comments put that the characters were based on the role-playing characters, and because Holden was the paladin, or was
Paladin,
the paladin, that's a very kind of not bland, because I love playing paladins in D&D, but like it's the other characters get the opportunity to be more morally grey and have different things, whereas the paladin's very stuck in their way of how they kind of have to be. So I don't know if that plays into it at all, because that's what he was initially based on. That has an effect. But yeah, obviously he might be a pretty front boy. I don't.
He seemed much more interesting in the show, and maybe that was just because we had a visual and the expressions, but yeah, he seemed a much more likable and relatable character in the show than he is in the book that I picked up on. But maybe he'll be molded and developed over the course of the books. Maybe he starts off as a blank slate, and then he becomes this interesting character at the end. I don't know. You can hope.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. My observation about Holden always is he'll do the right thing, not always the correct thing, but he'll do the right thing all the time. And sometimes the fun in the game as you move through the story is, well, what is the right thing here? As you're the reader kind of going along, going, I can know what I would do, and occasionally, there are outcomes that don't match what I thought or that are surprising because of that. But then when it happens, you're like, yeah, but that was the right thing to do, It's an interesting quandary to kind of put yourself in all the time, because you get these moral choices all the time that are there.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there is a scene where I think Abasarella makes a comment that he's he tries to do the right thing, but is it always the best thing to do? Is it maybe the right thing at this moment, but he starts a war and it results in all these other things happening. So I think she kind of pokes at him a little bit about, kind of to calm down and just be quiet and pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miller does the same thing in the first book as well, and basically derides him on it as well and say, is these moral high ground. This moral high ground that you have is all well and good, sonny boy, but but sometimes it isn't always effective or otherwise,
I would be really interested to know what you guys thought about when you're talking about kind of us being able to have an opinion on the Earth, about what you thought when Bobby went to Earth and had the whole discussion around the unemployment rates and the discussion she has with the lady at the cafe, and then the reflection of how that isn't Mars at all, because they've all got kind of one goal and no one would ever be unemployed. Because I thought that was a really interesting thought process about how Earth might end up. I was like, oh, that's odd, but okay.
That's something I thought was done pretty well, because, the inference is that Mars has like this really excellent equipment, and, the Rossi is like this state of the art vehicle. I still haven't got the reason why they call it a Corvette, if someone could explain that to me. But, they're innovating, whereas it seems the Earth is stagnating. And, in terms of work life and just human happiness, based on productivity. So I thought they're starting to bring that out pretty well.
I thought that was a commentary on the Second World War of the 20th century. Basically, Mars is Japan, in many ways, when it was reset and had to build and became a very technologically innovative and driven society, but also with this kind of core principle at the center of it, of what it wants to be and what it wants to do. Whereas a lot of the other nations, and you're seeing the modern day now without getting political, that, that we're getting away from innovation and creating a better life for ourselves and kind of putting our energy into all this other stuff. Although,
That's a great point. So yeah, I felt like that dichotomy was being drawn out there, and just we'll see how it plays out. And then the belt has her whole other issues going on as well.
Yeah, I kind of missed the belt.
Huh?
I missed the belt in this.
You missed the belt. Yeah. It's actually, I think, a very interesting society, the way they've drawn it, how people, it's almost like Mars. Yes, they're very innovative, but they're close enough to Earth to benefit from, that wealth. Whereas the belt, they really are just hard scrabble. And so, the personalities, the stereotypes of each group of people, I think they're drawing out pretty good. So
I did kind of take the Mars, the contrast between Earth and Mars, and Bobby coming to Earth and seeing the differences is on Mars they have purpose, they have to survive, they have a shared goal, otherwise they'll die. So everyone has to pitch in and everyone has to do something. I think on Earth it sounds like everyone's getting comfortable and they're just kind of, there's no purpose. They don't have a purpose anymore. They're too comfortable. It's almost like they're on their way to being like a Wall-E type of society where they're just kind of on carts, rolling around like big blobs of flesh. So that's kind of what I took out of it, is that they have a shared purpose, and that everyone feels important. They all feel like that they have a hand in the society moving forward or surviving.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice contrast from the first book, though, because it's very much black and white, that Earth is the place with all the resources, the wealth, all that kind of stuff. Mars is the military, and the belt has nothing, or scavengers, so to speak. But Caliban's War then sets it off to say, right, in Earth, they've all the wealth, but there's all these factions within Earth that want to do different things. It seems Mars, and same with the belt, it gets more complex as we move our way through the world, to say that all these people actually, never mind outward appearances, they all kind of want different things.
And I'm still stuck on the book one love story of, now my mind is going, Julie and the detective.
Oh, Miller.
Yeah.
And they landed on Venus, the planet of love. Venus represents love in astrology. So now they've got this Garden of Eden sort of building up over there, which can be an Armageddon for the solar system, or is it going to turn out to be, a catalyst for greater things? And that actually reminds me, I see the proto-molecule as a character, and I think by this time it taking human form, that it's not in terms of Miller, but just the way it was created as this hybrid monster thing, running around Ganymede. It's starting to humanize.
It's another faction, isn't it? You've got Earth, Mars, the Belt, and the
Exactly.
proto-molecule by itself, that's going to do what it's going to do. And everybody thinks they can control it, but actually it's got its own ideas.
Right. Yeah. And that's the symbol of Caliban, which is what made me start thinking of this, because Caliban is a character in a Shakespearean play who was a slave, but started thinking on his own. And so they thought they had control his captor thought he had control over him, but he started plotting his revenge on them.
I hadn't made that link at all. I didn't realize that was a character. But if so, then that links quite nicely, because you have the whole proto-molecule going outside of what it was planned to do in this thing, especially with its escaping the kind of explosive part of it and everything else. And that was quite interesting. I wasn't sure the whole linking to the other planet thing and the whole way it was developing was interesting. I wasn't sure what I thought about that, if I was honest. But I did like the whole it going outside of its own parameters that they put on it, sort of thing. That was done very well.
Yeah, and it becomes Miller at the end. Well, it doesn't become Miller, but takes on the face of Miller.
Represents, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's smart enough to know that that in order to influence, it needs to take on a similar form and use similar relationships, etc. To the person. Such a great end, though.
Yeah.
Creepy end. Oh my god. Oh my god. I had to read it because I honestly think I completely forgot about that last section, and I had to go back and I was just like, how did I forget? Oh my god. Like creeping off. Oh my god. Did not like that.
It's a great ending. And the proto-molecule being so close to this huge event at the end of the first book, and then everyone kind of forgets about it. It's like it's on Venus. Like, so what? I think that I kind of wondered, why is no one else really worried about this? But I think it speaks to that everyone is so involved with what their goals are that they're just ignoring this potential Armageddon level event that's like happening just by itself. I knew they're watching and keeping track, but it doesn't seem like anyone's really overly concerned about it.
It's like Don't Look Up, the movie Don't Look Up. Don't look at Venus.
But is that is it maybe because what do you just run around being scared all the time because you don't understand it, you don't know what it's going to do or what it's capable of, or do you just sit and watch it and kind of forget about it and get on with what you're doing because it's such a big concept to be scared of? And I think they did maybe point towards that when you had Sarala discuss that, how it kind of how they're kind of reverting back to old enemy back and forth because they don't know what to do about Venus. It's like, well, that's there, okay.
But it's great because we as the reader are going, oh my god, but Venus, why is nobody talking about Venus? We're so into it, and because we get thrown it in front of our face all the time, say, God, they're building something there, there's something happening there, there's something going to appear out of the murks here and just wipe them all out. That's kind of, I think, what happens to the readers. They're going through it saying, it doesn't matter what you're doing right now, because the apocalypse is just about dropping your doorstep, potentially.
That's a great point, because that did run through my mind. And I think, didn't Alex or somebody toward the end say something like, is the apocalypse coming? There was something about that. But it is something that worries us, the reader, or worried me throughout. What's she going to do about this while she's stuck on the, having radio silence on that ship and Venus is still going, growing and connecting. But something else I thought of, I just want to mention with Miller, you know, even, I mean, Miller being the representative of the proto-molecule, even in like all these urban legends, on Earth, there's all, every once in a while you'll read like, oh, aliens are among us and they're walking among us, and that's the first thing I thought of when Miller shows up again. Is I'm like, that reminds me of that urban legend. So I think that they're tapping into, um, maybe some of that, or maybe it's coincidence. I don't know.
Well, it could be because it leaves the possibility that, at any point when you meet somebody, it could be the proto-molecule inside somebody's head, doesn't it? It's that thing from outer space, potentially whether they use it or not, the chance is always there.
Right.
And plus
Between
Miller's
that
so...
and zombies, and
Yeah.
we've got lots of things to stay aware of. Oh, pardon me. Terribly sorry.
That's right. And you do get the sense that everyone's doomed because of proto-molecule. They have a single voice, a single goal. They're like, it's just a sheer power, and we can adapt. It can do all these things, and everyone else has this internal conflict where no one has a singular voice. They are all going in different directions with their own little goals. So you kind of get the sense that they're kind of screwed if this keeps going the way it does.
They fit the archetype of the Borg in Star Trek, or the automatons in Doctor Who, that kind of thing of you will lose your sense of sense individually, but look what you can achieve as an end goal. It's cool.
Yeah, it is.
I think I did struggle a little bit with the whole reasoning behind why on earth we were messing around with the proto-molecule trying to make super soldiers when that Venus thing was there. I did try to explain away a little bit by them trying to have like a first force if the proto-molecule does come out. But I feel I was a lot. I think maybe that's when you were saying maybe Venus wasn't getting enough attention. Like, why are you scrabbling around here, making soldiers and styling them into each other as the big bad rather than looking over here? But I don't know. Did you guys struggle with that at all, wondering why on earth they were bothering, or was that just me?
It's typical Earth theory, is it not? You just build bigger weapons, bigger bombs, and that'll get your aims across. We'll have way more nuclear weapons because, like, having 500 nuclear weapons is better than having 100 nuclear weapons. Therefore nobody will mess with it. It's the same kind of thing that happens throughout history here in some way, shape, or form. I just think it shows that people are inherently selfish. It's these factions are just looking out for themselves, and actually all those other things don't matter as long as we're top dog. We'll survive. They'll go after the weak.
I think I forget his first name, but Mr. Mao really represents the high stakes and the ruthlessness of that I guess impetus to develop weapons of mass destruction. I mean, even took his daughter, although he did not intend that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're representing, something that a lot of people think. We have this military-industrial complex, and it will continue, centuries in the future because human behavior is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of took it as them. They're still trying to turn a profit. They're still trying to better their position and make a few bucks before the apocalypse.
Did you call them soup monsters, Robyn? Did you call them soup Oh, okay. I thought you said soup monsters. I was like, that's actually a great, because they keep talking about the goo. So I thought you called them that.
I'll steal it though, for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to use it. That's funny.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That you've just made me think of what the highlight of the entire book for me. I don't know what it was for you. Is Avasarala's comeuppance over Jules Pierre Mao. Her eventually being able to put him in his place and wipe the smirk off his face. Like, that kind of stuff was just Oh, it was lovely to read. You're like, yeah.
Yeah. I hope to see some kind of, I don't know if he's out of the picture in the books or not, but it would be great to see some kind of resolution between him and Venus
Mhm.
at some point.
Do you mean Mao
Yeah,
or yeah?
Mal.
They did. They again. I don't know actually if it goes forward, but they did allude to it slightly or put a thought in your head about how had he been contacted by his daughter or by the proto-molecule as his daughter right at the beginning of the book, and I didn't know if that was going to be a setup because Miller obviously is at the end, and you're like, oh, was he contacted by his daughter, and it just wasn't brought up, and I couldn't remember that because the potential there by bringing Miller to contact Holden is that actually he could have very well been contacted by Julie at that point.
Very interesting.
But I don't know if that goes in the. I can't remember if that happens in the show and like all the books. So
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure.
Anything else you all can think of that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, the one thing that I wanted to ask everybody, right, because I think you'd said it in one of your weekly wrap-ups, Steve, that they're quite easy reads, right? Mm-hmm. But they're quite dense. They're surprisingly easy reads because, like, there's a lot happens and there's a lot of science in it and there's a lot of very technical stuff in it, but it is a real page turner. And if you don't get into like a rhythm, I can see why John or somebody didn't end up finishing it because you pick it up for a chapter and then go, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
What is happening here, or something like that. So I can see exactly why that would have that effect on people. But there definitely is something about it that makes it turn the page.
I was talking with my friend actually about this, and I was thinking about how books are written or how they're structured to get people in. And one of the discussions we were having, that especially during the action sequences or the earlier parts of the book, it's very short chapters. So you literally just go bam, 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 bam through all of this stuff that's occurring. And I think that's kind of one of the ways that, that the book is actually structured to make it feel very quick and keep you going at it and getting you through those chapters. So I think it's partly writing technique and the setup to be like easily just chomped through, basically.
You never get too bogged down in one section for too long. You just keep on, right, you're on the next thing.
Exactly. It's just action. Or, here. I know in this one it was a little bit slower in the middle with the explanation of going through the tunnels and everything else. Sure. But for the action scenes, they are very quick, very short chapters, keeping you your attention, I think.
And they usually leave off on a cliffhanger too, right? I mean, I think that's something that thriller writers do a lot. Is they leave off each chapter on a cliffhanger to try and, they walk into something or something. There's a revelation of. It may not be a big revelation, but it's enough to say, well, I want to know what happens. So I'm going to read the next 3 chapters to get back to this part of the story, so I can find out what happens. So
yeah, exactly. And as they were switching between obviously what was happening with Bobby and Avasarala, and also what was happening elsewhere. Both had cliffhangers, so you were like you were both like, oh my god, what was happening here? And then you're like, oh, I'm back here. Oh my god, what was happening here? So yeah, I think that's a way of how it's written.
Yeah, and I think with everything, it does bring up deep things, deep themes about human nature, and maybe some of the lighthearted, more slapstick type stuff. Helps us keep reading. Like the suspense, like you said, helps us keep reading. And then later on, just reflect on, well, gee, what just happened there? That's something to think a little bit more about. But one of my favorite scenes is when Avasarala lands on the Rocinante. That just seems so. I don't know. I thought of what are those comedy shows where everybody's running around and they all like suddenly end up in the same, running into each other in the same tunnel or something. And so there's still a little bit of that Three Stooges type stuff to me with it, but serious things to think about too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I had one which was the Amos character, which is, I know, Layla, you said that you thought he had a lot more depth in the book than the first one. than in the TV series, or it was explored a bit more. And obviously in this one, you very much get you get a snippet of his background, and then obviously interaction with his children and his kind of motivations behind why he's so against or so invested in this kind of crack storyline. Are you guys going to read any of the short stories in these?
Memories Legion. Yeah, I believe one of the short stories is what one of the seasons is of the TV series. I think is it that one when he returns home? Yeah. So I do plan to. Yeah.
Is there a reading order?
Somebody asked me that in the Discord, and I put up a diagram that somebody had gotten. He went, "That didn't help."
And some of them do happen. Obviously, I read is it Memories Legion? Yeah. And some of them do happen in between certain books, and some of them sit outside. And I think his backstory is one that probably sits outside because you can read it at any point because it's way before. Obviously, this actually occurs. So it depends which short story you're talking about.
So it's like Casimir in a way, I guess. That's another series where Brandon Sanderson's, world, where there's some shorter novellas and then the longer series. But yeah, I will read the short stories too. I wasn't aware there were short stories. So.
Oh, there's some really good ones.
Definitely want to look into it.
And speaking of writing, this is a collaboration that I never had the sense that there was more than one person writing it. It always seems very consistent. So I wonder how much, if it was a 50-50 collaboration or if it was just someone else who like a 80-20 or what the workload was, because it doesn't feel like a collaboration at all.
Exactly what I said last time. I'm wowed that it's the fact that it's because it's consistent. Like the first book is written like the second book is written, and so on and so forth. And the short stories, there's no like, well, this one feels different. So I haven't looked into it further. I should, because I said this last time, and it fascinates me. I don't know if one person writes it and the other person just edits it, or they do the ideas together and then the other person writes it. I'm not sure.
I listened a bit to the podcast Ty and the Guy, which is Ty Frank and Wes Chatham, who plays Amos. They mainly do it. Ty Frank seems to be the science guy. He seems to be the guy that does all the hard science, making sure it's consistent. I think he's a rocket scientist by trade, literally. And he does an awful lot. The character work and the plotting seems very Daniel Abraham. If you've read any other Daniel Abraham stuff, it's very consistent. I think with that, this kind of very long game kind of idea of we'll give you stories here and now, we'll give you characters to play with here and now, but it's the long game we're talking about here. And as each book gives you another bit of the characters, gives you another bit of the world, you kind of just fall deeper and deeper into a hole with it. But it's, all good.
Yeah.
It's a great podcast, by the way, though. Brilliant.
Just check that out.
What's it called?
Ty and the Guy. So TY and the Guy.
Actually, that was in the comment before, wasn't it? Yes, I need to check it out.
So they don't just talk about the Expanse show. They obviously do, but then they link it to other things like other movies and TV series that you might have seen, like Alien, all of that kind of stuff. So, you can definitely see an alien element in the proto-molecule outcomes and things that get made in Ganymede, etc. here,
Yeah, to get some alien. But it's such an iconic movie and series that it's hard to write a science fiction / semi-horror without, there being some kind of connection.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's such an archetype. One of the other things that struck me actually is the media, part of the media. When Prax puts his message out and garners the support, and how it flipped in a second from being positive, all sorts of contributions, lots of money, and then one thing came out and it was, he's a liar. He's, everything. People are so easily manipulated. The message is so easily manipulated, and just on the news cycle, one event can just turn it on its head, and it goes from that to just extreme hate. And actually, how winning the war and the message in the end was all about manipulating the media. However, Sarala then obviously gets support, etc. It's about manipulating the media, and that what Ehrenreich, etc. was lying or otherwise.
Definitely agree. I also thought it was interesting because as to that thing that they put out, I liked the way, because I know Layla, you brought this up last time, like surely everyone does this, surely like everyone's just spitting out news articles and everything else, but on here they did address that a little bit by saying, oh, because it's got James Holden in it, or because it's got this, it'll get picked up more and then it will go viral, I guess. So they did have a bit more of a discussion, because last time you brought up, like, doesn't everyone just stick out loads of random news all the time? Why is this so big? So I thought it was nice that they addressed that a little bit, because you're right, if everyone's just spewing out, how would it ever get noticed, or how would it ever get picked up? So I thought that was quite good. But you're right, I think it was a very, I guess maybe because people just like to believe bad things. So there was such a big thing that it came out and they were like, oh, actually, and it was quite a significant, like, being told that he abused his child was quite significant bad news. So it wasn't a small thing they were putting against him.
Yeah.
And
it was the mother. It was the mother saying it as well. So it was
exactly. I guess people don't want to be seeing supporting it, even just in case it had happened.
Yeah.
So
there's
this
a
nice
little bit
Twitter
there.
allegory.
Yeah, it is. There was a little bit there where I wondered if those allegations were true. There was a short period there. I wondered, did they change this for the TV show? Because it seemed it kind of was left, not for very long, but it was left open enough that it made me uncomfortable that they were helping him.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think Amos came and asks him, "Is it true?"
That's right.
And he says, "Of course not." And he says, "Well, if it was, would you have still helped me?" He said, "No, I would have thrown you out of the airlock or something like that, or broken your arms." So there, you know that okay, he didn't. But there was a little period of time where I wondered, did this really happen, or is this? And are they trying to manipulate the situation? So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's good.
That never occurred to me at all.
I was like, Prax would never.
I'm not going to sit here and listen to you talk about Prax that way.
Yeah. I was just more thinking, what are they going to do now? I wasn't even sure, wasn't sure what really the outcome was going to be. Yeah.
Well, anything else you guys can think of?
No, I was going to ask you guys if you were going to continue the series.
Oh, yeah.
I already have the book, so
Yeah.
I love Miller, so now I have to, keep reading Protomolecule Miller.
I'm going to start a
I
hashtag.
guess.
Miller was right, because it's a really bad rap.
That'll work. I think I've got to buy a Miller hat. You worked so well, goddammit.
And you're right. I think they do badmouth him quite a lot in this book as well. But he's such a fan favorite, which is interesting since he's put as the bad guy often. But obviously, not everyone who reads it, but the vast majority of readers, when you read reviews, everyone's like, "I loved Miller. I thought it was fabulous." So I think that's an interesting whatever. But yeah, it'd be nice to see more of Miller for sure.
He's not, just to finish this off, but he reminds me of Avrasarala in terms of being like this hard-edged person, who has this soft side. And in his case, ultimately sacrificed himself, So I do think that, the writers do set up parallels, like between Pax and, is it Jules Pierre now?
Wow, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the daughters.
It's fascinating, yeah.
We'll see where it goes.
That's good, but not to go back to the Bath and Wicks too much, but Miller, again, is the last person to realize that he's been shunted out. That it's that old idea. If you look at a circle of friends and you can't find the idiot, then the idiot is you, kind of thing. He's the last person to realize that in his context of why am I not getting good jobs? Why am I getting shunted out to all these things? Oh, it's because people see me as a drunk or whatever, and he's completely unaware. And again, that follows through for Holden. It follows through for a lot of characters, I think, as they go round.
In the first book, that's so heart-wrenching when he realizes it's him.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, you poor guy.
Come on, yeah.
So good. But I think it's heart-wrenching because I feel like, again, I was talking to my friend about this, like, you always worry that's you. You always
Mhm.
like, I don't know if you do, but I know I've already like, you always think, oh God, is that me? Like, am I that person? Oh, like, so it kind of makes you feel, and especially when he realizes it, it's just, and it brings it home. And I think that's why he's so likable.
Yeah.
Because he just, but yeah, I don't know if he's the same villain when he comes back. So
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think we've all had those thoughts. I think that's why people love Miller, because he has that vulnerability too.
Mhm.
To him.
Yeah.
Well, just to get before we wrap up, just to get back to Pete's question, what books are you reading at this time? So, Chris, what are you reading?
So I've just finished Heart and Dark, Book 2 of Sun Eater, which actually, since we've just been talking about this, is so remarkably similar in pacing, and because it's dense, complicated, all that kind of stuff, but super short chapters. Like there's 70 something chapters in that book, and it is a big book, but it's very chunky, very quick, easy read, and utterly brilliant as well. Oh, so good.
that's on my reading list for this month. I can't wait to get to it. So yeah. It's probably the next book I pick up, and I've heard so many good things, so I shall very happily pick that up next week.
Robyn, what are you reading?
Oh, I'm literally blitzing my way through The Last Policeman currently, which was, I think I picked up yesterday, and I'm almost 3/4 of the way through. I've just been literally, it's just really grabbed me. So I recommend that if you're into slightly depressing books. It's about the world ending and a policeman who has to investigate a crime, and the fact that he's still continuing to do his job while the world's falling apart. But it's a very easy read, but it's very interesting.
What about you, Layla? What are you reading?
I just purchased the first book in Anna Sparks Smith's trilogy. Trying to remember the name of it at the moment because I just bought it. But the opening pages look good. I'm also every night I read maybe 20 to 30 pages of House of Chains, Malazan, and just about through with that one as well. So I tend to have like a few things I'm reading at a time, and I don't know. I like the variety, so I like to read. So as we all do, I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm starting book 2 in the Empires of Dust. Probably today. I'd finished Caliban's War Thursday, so I'll start the Tower of Living and Dying probably today. For that, would have to have the trilogy done by September 10th. So don't want to fall too far behind. But awesome. So I guess cool. That was I think you've all already mentioned this, but it's a very easy read. But once we start talking about it, we realize how much we may not really put too much thought into that you pick up on. So it's great. This is a perfect series to chat about like this because there's a lot of themes you can pick up.
Right.
Cool.
Chris, you want to tell us where people can get in touch with you if they want to?
You can find my YouTube channel. It's Chris Mohan, Mohan, and you'll see videos and books and movies as I suggested earlier on.
Yeah, you can find my YouTube channel, Bookends and Biscuits, but you can also find me quite often on Twitter as well under the same tag. So that's why I'm doing it.
And Layla?
You can find me on Twitter right now. I am setting up a literary magazine website. It's just not quite ready to go yet. So hopefully soon.
Oh, nice. Looking forward to it.
Nice.
Let us know so we can boost that signal for you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for everyone who came by and interacted in the chat. It's always fun, and we will hopefully see you next month. I think we're all on board for book 3,
yes.
So I think we should be okay. Okay. So thanks again, and we will see everyone soon.
Thanks a lot.